Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you 5 cheat codes for building powerful and unique chord progressions. Generally, when you're writing chord progressions, there's 2 parts to it. The first part is just coming up with the chord progression that you like, and then the second part is making those chords sound good and unique to your song. I do find that a lot of producers know how to come up with the chords, but when it comes to making those chords sound unique, that's where I find a lot of producers have trouble. So here's 5 reliable things that you could do to make your chords come to life. Method number 1 is to try chord inversions. Chord inversions help chord progressions sound easier on the ears. And you do this obviously after you come up with the chord progression. So we have a chord progression in basic form. It sounds like this. And if we look at this progression, it moves up and then it moves down to this chord, and right here is a big change. And then also from this chord to this chord is a big change as well. And big changes generally aren't a problem. Big changes tend to sound cheesy sometimes, and they could be a little bit harder on the ears than a smaller change. So what inversions help us do is take these chords that are sticking out and causing these big changes and tuck them in with the rest of the chords. So if we take this 5th here on the 2nd chord, and we pull it down an octave and create a second inversion, now this chord and this chord have a smaller change that is closer in pitch. And then the other note that sticks out from the rest of the bunch is this one down here. That's okay to have notes that stick out, but I always think it's worth trying to invert this chord or do whatever you can to take it out of its basic form to see if you can come up with something a little bit more unique. So I'm going to pull that note up an octave, and now we have a more linear progression that should sound easier on the ears. That sounds good. And of course, if you don't like it, you just reverse anything that you just did. The second method on this list is look for an opportunity to double a note. Doubling any of the notes in the chords, which is the root, the 3rd, or the 5th, or if you have other notes like 7s or 9s, doubling any of those notes will make that note more enhanced in the song. My favorite note to double is the root notes. So I'm going to take these and just pull them down an octave, and just listen to how doubling that note fills out the chords so much. That sounds delicious. Method number 3 is to try adding a pedal tone. You guys know that I am a pedal tone freak. A pedal tone is when you take a single note and you run it with your chord progression, but it doesn't change. And the easiest note to use for a pedal tone is going to be the tonic of the chord progression that you're in. So we're in C sharp major. So an easy pedal tone to try would be the C sharp. That is so special. I like pedal tones so much because whatever emotion or mood that your chord progression is creating, if you put a pedal tone on the tonic of the scale that you're in, that emotion becomes even more enhanced. Another fun thing to try with pedal tones is to take that note and put it 7 semitones or 5 steps up. I learned this from dissecting a lot of Chainsmokers and Avicii songs. Just reminds me of like the good old days of EDM. This next method for coming up with really powerful chords is to pay attention to the chord movements and not so much just the individual chords. The individual chords are important, but what creates the vibe is how each chord moves from one to another. For example, if you have just one chord, we're kind of limited in our melodic journey. I could do that for days. But really, there's no movement, and we need movement. Now, there's theories that the direction that a chord progression moves helps to create its emotion or mood. For example, a progression that moves down will create a sadder, more serious tone. And the other theory is that if the chord progression moves upwards, it's likely to generate a more positive emotion. Isn't that pretty happy? That's the same progression from Kygo's Firestone. Now, obviously, you're not just limited to chord progressions that either move up for positive and happy or down for sad and serious. I think the best thing to do is just pick a specific emotion that you want to write a song with and just find a combination of upward and downward movements with your chord progression until you find a progression that specifically hits that mood or emotion. Here's a chord progression that moves down and then back up. And we can hear that when the chord changes from this chord to this chord, we get more of a dark mood. And then when we move into these chords, the mood lifts a little bit. And then what the progression does is it will average out the overall mood. Isn't that fascinating? I just think that's fascinating. This last method is the most important one by far, and it is automation. I actually want to do a whole video on this alone, and I will probably do that. Automation is how you make your chords come to life. It's how you add movement to your chords, and it's how you add expression to your chords. Our biggest problem as musicians who make music on a computer is that it's very easy for us to get stuck with this computerized sound. In other words, when we make songs, if we don't do enough to humanize the music, we can end up with songs that sounds like a computer made it. But there is one magic tool that you can add to any sound that will allow that sound to come to life and start moving around, and it's called automation. Let's take a set of chords. They sound like this. Now, our first instinct when we write chords and we put them in a song is just to leave them as is. And they're just happening. Nothing's changing about them. Nothing is unique. So anytime I write chords now, especially if it's with a synth, I will turn on the automation and then engage a cutoff knob or an EQ. In this case, because it's a synth, I can use the cutoff knob, and you can do this with most synth sounds. And what I'm going to do, just so they're not like perfectly basic, is I'm going to go across the entire 8 bars, and I'm just going to let this filter open slowly. It doesn't have to be aggressive, although it could be, but we can just open this slowly. See how like tense that was compared to when we heard them before? Now you can get crafty with this. You can move them all around. I've been doing this movement actually a lot more lately. And then we open it at the transition, like wide open. And so that way it's kind of moving all around. But ultimately, the one that I ended up sticking with for this song was a slight open. And then when we got to the transition, a hard open. The transition now sounds like this. hear how that automation just enhanced that transition? That's what it's all about. That's what you're trying to do. Automation makes the arrangement move. And keep in mind, you can automate everything. I'm just automating a cutoff filter, but you could automate the EQ, you could automate reverb and echoes, which I love. The sky's the limit for what kind of detail you add to your song with automations. That's a video for you guys. If you'd like more help on writing chords and developing moods and emotions with chord progressions, make sure to check out this video here. Also, be sure to check out my EDM Bootcamp course below for a structured path to learning music production. This course covers music theory, arrangement, sound design, mixing, and mastering, and also comes with access to my community where you can receive feedback on your music every step of the way. If that sounds like something that interests you, there's a link below this video. And as always, stay tuned for the next video lesson.